Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
That is definitely
Can you
working.
hear me? Is that good? Yeah. Ah, okay. Okay, good evening and welcome. I'm Councillor Saya Raza, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's now 7:02 p.m. and I would like to welcome everyone in this meeting of the committee, my fellow scrutineers, members and officers of the council and members of the public, whether present with us in House to House or watching the committee on council's YouTube channel. A particular welcome to Councillor Farah Kamran, who is joining the committee and bringing us back up to full capacity of 10 members. Councillor Kamran served on OSC on 2022-23, so it's perhaps less of a welcome and more of a welcome back, so thank you for that. Today's agenda focuses on the council's budget for the first substantial agenda item being the London Borough of Hounslow financial position update and 2024-25 budget. This is an obviously important issue with substantial implications for the work of the council across the new financial year. I expect this item to take up the lion's share of discussion today, although we also have a second substantive item for our consideration, the delivery plan monitoring for the third quarter of 2023-24. In addition, we have a number of shorter items on our agenda. There are a trio of reports detailing the results of the recent Ofsted inspections, looking at the Ryde Children's Home, the Westbrook Short Break Unit, and the Council's Children's Services. Updates from the current work of all scrutiny panels as they approach the sharp end of their deep dive work, and updates from the North West London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and our regular review of the work programme and urgent business. For the benefit of our guests, I'll take a few moments to set out how the meeting will work. As chair, I'll run the meeting and invite people to speak. I hope we can combine questions and observations, as we have done much of this municipal year, to allow for a more fluid discussion. I shall invite our guests to introduce their report. I will then invite members of the committee to ask questions of our guests. I, or Councillor Fertmore, Vice Chair, shall then speak last and then briefly sum up the discussions and advise of any issues or common ground to note. Every member of the committee who wishes to speak will have the opportunity to speak. Please be mindful of your fellow committee members and our guests and ensure your contributions are pertinent and help us frame meaningful recommendation. Having set out the way in which I will chair the meeting, shall we begin? Okay, so agenda item 1, apologies for absence, declarations of interest and other communications from members. I have received an apology from Councillor Sidhu. Are there any other apologies I'm unaware of? Oh, okay, yeah, that's just thank you. Do any members of the committee have an interest to declare or any other communications they wish to share? If so, please do so now. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2. We have before us the minutes of the 7th of November committee meeting. Do members have an issue of accuracy to raise on a particular set of minutes? If so, then please let me know. Otherwise, we will agree the minutes now. All agreed? Thank you, all agreed. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on now to agenda item number 3. The big item, financial position update in 2024-25 budget. Anyone reading the news over the last 12 months will be aware of the financial pressures facing local authorities. It is important that this committee plays a role in understanding and scrutinising the development of the council's budget. We had the opportunity in November to engage with the budgetary process where we considered a One Hounslow financial strategy. In December, the Local Government Association, or LGA, announced that 1 in 5 council leaders feared they would have to issue a Section 114 notice, effectively declaring themselves bankrupt. Last month, the government announced 600 million of additional funding for councils. As our papers show, Hounslow's share of this one-off funding mainly focused on social care totals 2 million. Tonight's papers show that the budget proposes using reserves to reach a balanced budget and a challenging future picture. Against the backdrop, we are asked to note the draft budget and progress made to develop sustainable financial position over the medium term and provide comment and feedback on proposals in front of us. We are joined this evening by Councillor Rajwat, Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Strategy, Resource and External Affairs, Andrew Cox, the Council's Interim Executive Director of Finance and Resources, Rupa Ragwani, Council's Acting Chief Financial Officer. We also have a number of Councillor Rajwat's Cabinet in attendance. Welcome to you all. Councillor Rajwat, may I ask you to introduce your report? Given the matter under discussion, I'm keen that we can delve into the budget in depth. To that end, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you, committee, for having me. You've done all the introductions, so I'll dive straight in the interest of time. Always good to come back. So this discussion supplements discussion that we had in November. And at that point, you'll recall that I said it was very, very challenging. Well, that challenge hasn't gone away. So I'll take you through the slide decks that have been, that's been circulated to you in advance, just to perhaps flesh out some of the detail in there, but obviously want to leave as much time as possible for questions as well. So yes, it has been challenging. That challenge hasn't gone away. We've seen inflation remaining high. Cost of living crisis hasn't gone away, and the cost of services also remains high. That hits our residents incredibly, but it also hits the council. And in the November paper, and when I came to see you in November, we hope that some of that by now would have started tailing away. It hasn't tailed away quite as much as we would have liked. So we are still facing quite a challenging budget round, but obviously we are absolutely committed to not only delivering on our corporate plan, which is the ambitions of our residents, but also setting a balanced budget as well. So the first slide kind of highlights some of the risks that we're facing at a high level. So obviously funding from government remains a challenge, ever reducing. No real joy in the settlement. Again, a single year settlement, which isn't really helpful. A multi-year settlement would have been much, much better for us to plan over the medium term, which is what we like doing. A real uncertainty around government reforms, in particular on adult social care, children's social care, but also in terms of housing, and for us as well here in Hounslow, in particular on asylum matters as well, is problematic to have to deal with. The impact, as I just mentioned, on high inflation and interest rates, which impact on our cost of borrowing. Then the cost of living crisis and the impact that has on our residents in terms of the numbers coming through our front door looking for support when they are reaching problem point or crisis point. For us in the council, the general cost of supplies, both in terms of workforce and goods. We have seen an increase in demand in adult social care and children's social care, and that obviously has an impact on what we are spending, but we're also seeing that coming through in terms of housing and temporary accommodation, which is something that we are monitoring very, very closely. And then, of course, there are factors going across, happening across the world, the war in Ukraine being one of them, that has local impacts as well that we need to monitor very, very closely as well. So looking at the budget position that I presented to you in November, that followed on from July, you'll see that we started with an opening gap of £28.2 million. And we started looking at some of the pressures that existed in terms of cost inflation, service demand, and less so capital financing, which gave us the figure that I'm really focused in on, the do nothing gap, i.e. what would the gap be if we didn't put any interventions in? Obviously not for 1 second suggesting that we wouldn't put interventions in place, but that figure is incredibly high, and it's something that we all need to be worried about and conscious of. It's fair to say both myself as lead member, but also as leader, and the cabinet alongside officers have been doing a lot of work in the background. So between July and November, that cumulative gap did come down, but it is still a number that I wasn't comfortable with, and it gave us the rigor that's involved in sort of looking at some of the issues, understanding them properly, and really applying pressure to bring them down is really what we were really focused on between November and setting the budget. Now, the committee will be aware when I came here in November, we hadn't had the settlement for this year. So we were working on the basis of the settlement for the year before, from November 22. We were working on the council tax base, and that's just been published, what, 2 cabinets ago? January, yeah, which gives us a sense of the number of Band D properties that we will have or project to have in the borough, to give us a sense of the level of income and the collection rate as well. So that is included, I think, in the Cabinet report, but it's also in the January papers as well for your viewing. We were making estimates on inflation based on the rate in September, and we were doing some more work trying to predict demand growth and how that would change. And there is another slide further on in the deck that kind of bottoms that out in terms of what we think. But I would say in terms of demand, it's a changing feast. It's a moving feast. It will continue changing, and it is quite volatile as well. We identified some early savings which were included in the November position, and then we had some one-off savings also included, which contributed to that November figure of £23.1 million that we needed to find by the time we got to now in order to set a balanced budget. So what's been going on post the last time I was with you? We had the settlement. And there's a supplementary slide on the settlement for information. Very happy to answer any questions on that. We published the council tax base report, as I said, and we've done some detailed work around cost inflation and the outcomes of that review, which are included in the budget papers that you see before you. That includes pay, London living wage, contractual inflation, levies, and other things. And we've done a lot more work around trying to predict what demand growth or change will look like, and again that is included within the papers, the actual budget papers that you see. We've identified further savings options and further one-off items, including short-term grants as part of the settlement, such as the new homes bonus, the service grant, and additional social care funding. You'll know as well as I do, we are legally required to set a balanced budget, and what we at November, as I sort of alluded to just a second ago, any further savings would, the remaining gap would need to be addressed through further savings, the council tax rate, and use of reserves, as Chair, you alluded to in your introduction as well. So the next slide talks about some of the key changes in terms of resources and funding, inflation, demand growth, savings, and one-off bridging. That is there for your information. Again, very, very happy to answer any questions that you may have on any of that as well. So areas that we've explored. So when I talk about a lot of work in the background, this sort of at a very high level gives you a sense of the sort of different layers of work. At the very top of that is the delivery plan. So as part of the corporate plan work in 2022, there was a very detailed delivery plan that is a live document that evolves, and we fully expect a number of our savings to be delivered through existing programs, and some of those are still coming through with detailed business cases, a project management methodology to be able to deliver them, and tracking through performance reporting. And I think the next item on the agenda actually talks to that a little bit as well. But we've also been looking at non-commercial income. So that's tax raising powers, fees and charges, as well as commercial income. So trying to get the maximum out of our commercial assets, Western International being one example of that, but there are others across the borough. How we prioritise use of specific grants and funding sources and reserves for spend that's currently allocated to the general fund, reducing the availability of these, so the warning there is that those obviously do reduce the availability of these funding sources for one-off initiatives and projects. Reimagining the delivery of services and functions through different models. So a good example of that is family hubs and community hubs, changing the way we offer our services, being out there in the community, helping people before they hit crisis point, so they don't suffer as much, and it does make us a saving. And then reductions, sort of efficiencies, as the last thing that we kind of look at as an option. I do firmly believe that looking at service models should deliver a good benefit to the council, and I'm really keen to explore that to its maximum before we start looking at cutting services, because that's not sustainable, and that has a real impact on residents who are more dependent on our services than ever before. Just expanding on that, so the November report that you saw in terms of delivery plan had a certain number of savings in them, transforming the community experience, third-party spend, and the restructure of our top 3 layers of leadership, which have been reported on. There is more that is coming throughout the year that we are keeping a very close eye on and making sure that they get to full business case, get agreed, and go into delivery as quickly as they possibly can in a sustainable way. And then the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory within the slide that you see before you. So in terms of reserves, we often get asked about our reserve position, and it's worth pointing out that reserves take many different forms. There is a general reserve. We have to hold a minimum amount in our reserves. That is a judgment for Rupa as Section 151 officer, and that has increased. The minimum level has increased, but then we've got specific reserves that are ring-fenced for other functions, and it may well be as simple as grant arrives in our account on day X, but isn't ready to be spent till day Y. It will be held in reserves for that specific purpose, in effect. We also hold reserves for risk, to try and mitigate risk. So a good example of that is there's a lot of volatility in business rates at the moment, so it's prudent to hold a reserve to try and smooth some of that out. Then we've got, so I've talked about operational reserves and strategic reserves to support strategic priorities that are in the corporate plan. So some of that work that I just spoke about projects that are yet to come out, money has been set aside for those projects, ready to go once business cases are approved, and we start on delivery on those as well. And then we've got purely ring-fenced funding, such as public health, the dedicated schools grant, and schools balances as well. So you will have noted in the report there is a recommendation from that I've made to Cabinet for the Cabinet meeting. Should that be agreed, that'll go on to Borough Council for debate and decision around the council tax rate. We're allowed to increase the council tax rate by 4.99% without needing a referendum. That is the recommendation that I have made to Cabinet for their discussion when we meet next week, isn't it? Yeah, next week. The 2% of that will be ring fenced for adult social care. The next, that's the slide on potential council tax revenue, just gives you a sense of some of the thinking that I had in terms of how much we can raise from council tax. So with 4.99%, it raises about £6.5 million, which certainly does help, but I would draw your attention to the purple bar on that slide, which indicates inflation does run higher than that amount. So whilst council tax helps, it doesn't bridge the gap completely on its own. So it's worth keeping that in mind. And then we've got those ring fence funds. These will be familiar to you. The housing revenue count, you'll note that we refreshed the housing revenue count in January. Well, we've had to do it again in light of market conditions, and that's just recently been agreed through Cabinet. And then we've got the dedicated schools grant. You'll know that that's in 3 blocks. The high needs block has the largest pressure on it, although the other 2 do have some pressures on them. But we are in the safety valve agreement, and we're working through the gateways that we've agreed with the DFE in order to release funding on that as well. And again, happy to answer any questions on that. And then the final slide from me just gives you a sense of the timetable, but I think it's important to say, as you'll be used to now, for us, budgeting isn't February to February, it's constant, it's in many respects never ending actually, but that is the rigor that you need in terms of the pressures that we find ourselves under. It's absolutely right that we keep up the pressure on officers and ourselves to deliver efficient, well-managed, good services, transform the way we offer our services, and also innovate for the future. For example, in Councillor Dunn's area, on some of the green initiatives, having declared the climate emergency that will really deliver a benefit in the long term, we can't lose sight of those because that would be wrong not only for the council but also for the environment as well, not to put too fine a point on it. So whilst this gives you a sense, it is a constant thing, and I'm sure I will be back here very, very soon talking about budget matters again. So at that point, Chair, I will stop. There are supplementary slides in there. Happy to take any questions on those, but hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Rajwat. We now move to the point of clarification to address our guests. Remember, committee, it's an opportunity to seek clarification. The chance to discuss the issue more broadly will follow shortly. To you, committee members, any questions? Councillor Foot, please.
I'm sorry to say this, I'm trying to find where I actually saw the note that I'm about to comment on, but I can't find it in amongst this huge bundle of papers. But I seem to remember in the last 24 hours, when looking through, that there seemed to be a small increase in overall staff numbers. I don't know if that was correct, and if so, you could comment on that.
So I'll ask Mandy just to provide the clarification.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is in the pack, the staff numbers. Yeah, so sure. So yeah, I don't think it's in the pack, so I'm not familiar with exactly what the headcount is right now, and whether or not that's the FTE in post or actually the staff numbers. It does vary year to year. Obviously, sometimes we've got contracts that are coming in, and sometimes we've got things that we stop doing. Very happy to get hold of the data and share that with the committee, just in terms of where we are year on year in terms of those numbers. That would be help. I'm not quite sure with the information you've got, Councillor. Yeah, I mean it does fluctuate some. It's not fluctuated by a big number over recent years.
So again, I've not seen those numbers occur. I don't recall seeing them in the pack, but I would imagine with some of the transformation work in the delivery plan, you will see a change in numbers as we start bringing people in to help with some of the project management. But again, I think probably if it's all right with you, Councillor Foot, we'll look into that and get some more data for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Biddle.
Chair, could we have that information going back several years, please? And I realise that we've taken staff in from other organisations. Fusion was contracted out and it's now Lambton Leisure, but I think we need to see that movement and compare it with, ideally for me, 2018 onwards, but others might have a different starting point.
Absolutely, and we'll do it with a bit of a rationale of what those movements relate to. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. A few years, thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Yeah, Councillor Biddle. No, okay. I'll pose a question to Councillor Rajwat. So for the council, I guess we all have sort of income and expenditure. Really what I want to do is what sort of strategy we're having as a council to increase or generate more income.
So yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a good question. So as I alluded to in the slides, we're trying to get the maximum amount of everything. So everything is on the table. I think it's important to say, firstly, we have a number of commercial assets in the borough. So trying to get the maximum out of those is really, really important to us. But then obviously we've got tax raising powers and fees and charges as well. A lot of fees and charges will be based on cost recovery and some will be more discretionary, and looking at what is a sustainable level where we can generate enough income without scaring people away. So that's quite important for us, alongside being as efficient and lean as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor O'May, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jowett, just wanted to clarify on the savings gap. I know you've listed out a few different points, primarily on further savings, council rates, and use of reserves. I mean, in terms of feasibility, I mean, what's the feasibility in terms of further savings? And if the feasibility is really high, then I would think that's always a good positive. And supposedly it's the feasibility is not that high, and you're looking, I don't know if it's 50-50, what would be your alternative? Would you then fall back on the reserves, or is it the tax rates will be your alternative?
So we've explored every opportunity before recommending an increase in the council tax, because we appreciate people out there are struggling. As I alluded to in the presentation, the delivery plan is where the bulk of savings will come from. And it's no good just saying we're going to do something and not have a plan on how to do it. So we've adopted a project management methodology that business plan through the stages into delivery, and then we monitor how that is delivering over time. And there'll be a regular report that both Overview and Scrutiny will see, but also Cabinet see as well, and can challenge and test as they're going forward. I take the view that cutting services is absolutely the last thing. So this budget doesn't propose any cuts in services. We believe that transforming the way we offer services by being out in the community and acknowledging that what may work, the services that may be located in Felton may not be as relevant in somewhere like Chiswick or Brentford or Isleworth or Heston. So flexing that offer depending on where people are and what they're asking for will help. And that's a lot of signposting, preventing people getting into crisis. Apart from that, there's a lot of work going on in terms of the green stuff that I alluded to. So having declared a climate emergency, the action plan around that. Councillor Chowdhury is working on the health front as well. And Councillor Lambert is working on a specific project around the integration between health and social care to try and make sure those handoffs are as smooth as possible so that people can live independent lives at home or in the best setting for them, which will also deliver a saving. So it's about having that methodology in place and really testing the business plans and then reporting on them in a really clear and transparent way. What I don't want to see in the reporting on the delivery plan is all greens. I want to see ambers and reds and be able to understand the rationale about what maybe can be sped up, what needs a little bit more focus, what we can sort of just let work in the background because it's delivering as we expected it to.
Councillor Biddle, please.
Thank you. Obviously, it's good to see savings. They're needed. And I note your comment, it's not about reducing services people depend on, but I'm concerned about extraneous services, which we are providing an awful lot of activities, events, whatever it happens to be. And I don't want to go into the detail here in such a big meeting, significant meeting, but it's about the efficiency of method as well. I'm very concerned, for example, about the gap to come in your projections. We're looking at 31.8 million in 26, 27, depending on which level you look at it. It might be 51.2. So efficiency savings have got to continue. And I wonder if you could at some point give the committee an analysis of some of the services that you're providing and their effectiveness, because there are groups of people, officers who are going round the borough and doing certain things. And I wonder how many people they're actually affecting, improving the lives of, in relation to the cost of having them out of the office and doing something else. I don't mean they have to be in the office. What I mean is that is it a nice to do event rather than a need to do, a nice to do service rather than a need to do service. That's, I think, the focus that we should be looking at.
So I think I would always come back to what does our corporate plan say? What were our commitments to our residents and all the activity in and around the organisation in some way relates to that, and it should absolutely relate to that. And some of that comes back to the point that I just made in response to Councillor Mayor's question around a robust business plan, understanding exactly what we need, what the issue is, what we're trying to address, and how we're addressing it. Now, within that, there will be innovation, and what I see as innovative, you may not see as innovative. I wouldn't call that a waste of service. We can talk about specific areas. Perhaps it might be better if there are specific areas that you're concerned about, because it's, without making a criticism of you, Councillor Biddulph, what you said is quite vague. So I can answer it in vague terms, but if there are specifics that you are particularly worried about, I'm very happy to engage in a conversation on that. But certainly, as far as I can tell, accepting that there is more to come, everything relates back to the corporate plan and the promise that we made to our residents.
No, I'm sure that's right. But it's a question of how it's delivered. It's efficiency of method that I'm talking about, rather than anything else. It's, are we doing it in the right way to maximize the resources that we're putting into it and the benefits that we get back? If you've got events and only 3 people come, the question mark is 30 people there for 3 people. Doesn't seem very efficient to me, for example. And if it's not the right 3 people either.
I don't think we'll ever get to who the right 3 people are necessarily, but yeah, I come back to that business plan that will talk through options, look at different options, and things are iterative, things can be adapted, things can be changed. Nothing is ever set in stone. You have to be flexible. You have to be innovative. You have to change. If something doesn't work, then we have to be up to changing it. But it may well be the case that actually those 3 people are people that were in extreme crisis and are no longer, because they've got the right information or they know what they need to do. That for me is money well spent. It's not necessarily I accept your point around method. I absolutely do. I'm not arguing against that. But it's also about helping the right cohort at the right time.
I agree, but I just make the point that I think there are things that are happening. There are organizational activities of some sort where it's not people in crisis. It's the nice to do point that I'm trying to make. Need to do, of course, and I think there are areas, it seems to me, in the organization which need more funding, more people, more trained people, more available people, however you want to look at it. And others where I think there's an oversupply because the effectiveness and the need isn't as great.
So, Chair, I think probably take this offline.
Yeah, can I just, with regards to efficiencies, this is coming up later on in our sort of delivery plan as well. On the next agenda, we can certainly touch base with that. If I can just ask Councillor Foot and then Tuck afterwards, please.
Yeah, just to follow up on what I said earlier, we've actually found the report, and there's a report from HR 3 days ago that shows an increase in staffing levels of 80. I don't know if we've got plans to level that up or what.
So the first 3 tiers of the organisation have been restructured, and that you'll be well aware of, Councillor Foot. The next layer down is now, we're going to commence looking at that after Easter. Yeah. And that will take a longer period. It's about looking at roles, responsibilities, some of what Councillor Biddulph's point was, who's doing what and how we can work more corporately. So I wouldn't want to say at this point it will reduce or need to increase. I don't know the answer to that just yet. But I think Mandy's earlier point about getting some rationale about that report, which I haven't seen, if I'm honest, so that we can understand that a little bit better. And then we can also obviously take any questions that you may have following on from that offline. Okay. That's fine. Yeah, we'll get some more rationale for you. No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reading into Appendix I, the Section 25 statement. The conclusion and actions at the end mentions like we are quite heavily reliant on one-off measures, and the conclusion says if these one-off measures to fall away, the council will have a budgetary gap of about 30 million for 25-26. And it also says, like, should the financial picture not improve, then we may have to have some service reductions in 25-26. So what are we doing to address that?
So for those that aren't aware, in her capacity as Section 151 officer, Rupa, sorry, to mention the name, has to produce that statement, and it's I sort of see it as almost like an audit risk document, highlighting where the risks exist. So yes, she is absolutely right, and what we've alluded to in the slides and within the budget papers is, reserves, and I've said this many times to committee, reserves are always one-off. Once you've spent them, you're not guaranteed to get them back. So we need to move away from them. I would argue at this point, government's left us no choice. The roof is leaking, so we need to dip into those reserves to try and break that up. But that's not a position that we want to be in continuously. And I think that's the comment that Rupert's making. Sorry, I'm sort of paraphrasing what I think you would say in the circumstances. Please do correct me if I'm wrong. But that's where some of the transformation services that I mentioned earlier to try and deliver some of those savings and moving away from one-off funding sources comes from. But it is right in her professional capacity that she highlights, actually, if we don't take this seriously, and this is where the rigor comes from, the pressure that Cabinet are applying on the organisation, and officers are charged to apply on their teams. If we don't do any of that, then it will leave a bigger problem. And that's where councils, and I should say some very good councils out there, are falling over because they don't hold those levels of reserves, and it is more difficult out there. We've been very careful in the way we've managed money over the years, so we have that position where we can dip into reserves occasionally. With the transformation work that you'll start seeing coming through over the course of the year, that will help that position come along. But I think it's absolutely right that we're open and transparent about, if things go wrong, then there is a problem, and the extreme there is having to cut services. Let's face it, if we declare a Section 114, it is 114, isn't it? 114 notice, commissioners will come in, and the first thing they'll do is start slimy sizing services. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, it's there to flag the risks. Obviously, alluding back to that MTFS table, there is a 30 million gap over the medium term, which is referenced in the report. And the work now has to be about trying to address that 30 million gap over the medium term.
So are we confident enough that we'll be able to fill that gap in medium term?
We have to, Councillor Tuck. We have to. But yeah, yes. It's about keeping up pressure. It's about being transparent, and it's continuous review. It's that point I made at the end. It was a bit of a clumsy point. I appreciate that budgeting, the budget round never really stops. And we have to keep monitoring, keep looking at it, and keep looking at the organisation as well, and looking at where we can get help as well from external partners. So you never say never, but I have a greater degree of confidence than I did last year, because I feel like we've got a plan that will deliver, and that we can monitor and be really transparent on.
Thank you. Councillor Kamran.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the dedicated school grants. It's supplementary pack, page number 24. There is a different blocks, like how are blocks allocated? Is there any list of schools who receive the grants? Thank you.
It's a bit more of a technical question. So there's 4 blocks within the DSG, early years, schools block, high needs and central block. They all work in different ways in terms of allocation. DfE have got quite strict guidelines around how that's allocated. So the schools blocks allocated out to individual schools in the borough according to a formula. So this year we moved fully towards the national funding formula, which is where government ultimately wanted all local authorities to get to. So that's a schools block. Early years block goes out to our early years providers in the borough. So that could be school provision, or it could be private providers. And there's a formula behind that again too, which is based on an hourly rate. That's out to consultation at the moment with our early years provider, and that concludes anytime round about now. I think it's going to Schools Forum as a sum up next week. Central services block is for our core funding costs. So that's kind of more Hounslow based, kind of us as a local authority costs base. It's a very small amount. It's about just a bit over £1 million. And then the high needs block is the one that you're probably more familiar with, which covers the SEND provision. And that again is it's kind of proportioned up in different ways depending on who that funding is going out to. But it's about providing that provision to our children that have got special educational needs or disabilities in the borough. And that's the block that's got the most significant pressures in it, or has had over recent years, and that's the block that is the main focus of it as part of our safety valve agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Malik, please.
I just want to find, just for information only, we get 29 chief officers, and I'd just like to know what they're costing us, just for information only.
I don't have that information to hand, Councillor Malik. As part of the narrative, we can look to provide that information. That's not a problem. But a lot of them actually will be published anyway as part of the pay statement, won't they? Mandy, I look to you.
Yeah, so that's coming in May. But also currently a lot of the way that the budgets are set up, the officers are by directorate and service. So one of the things that we are looking at is how we cost the cost of management, the cost of chief officers. So yeah, we can put some of those numbers against the staffing report that we bring back.
Any other questions? Councillor Biddulph.
Just going back to reserves, thank you. Could we have the figures for the other blocks of reserves? Yes. And there used to be a global figure in the budget, I think, and doesn't seem to be in this document.
Yeah, Rich, let me just find the page number in the budget. It's actually in the budget report.
It's in the main report.
There is actually an appendix that goes into the detail of the reserves as well, which is Appendix H.
Yeah.
And so that will cover off the general unallocated balance, which is our kind of very last resort type balance, which is the 13.8 million that the leader highlighted earlier. And then it's got the individual reserves that make up the earmarked reserves, which are broken down into strategic, operational, and risk. And ring-fenced, actually, because we've got a handful of ring-fenced reserves which have got certain conditions around them, like the public health and the schools balances.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone else? Yeah, we will discuss later. But yeah. A question I just want to sort of raise with the team here is, of course, we do have business rates, and there is a breakup of business rates. But I guess, is there any wiggle room when it comes to business rate to what we can negotiate, what we keep in London Borough of Hounslow?
I would love to, Chair. So there was a couple of years ago, where we were able to keep 100% of business rates growth, and across London we chose to pool that and then allocate it out to the boroughs. I can't remember the exact amount that we got back from that, but it helped with some good work around skills, employment, broadband connectivity. The Treasury decided that they didn't like that model, so they reverted back to traditional model. So we only keep 30% of the business rates that we raise. That 30% is significant, and it is important. In my capacity as a London leader and also chair of the West London Alliance, working with London Council, so other London leaders across London, to talk about what our devolution ask is, considering that there will be a general election. Now, I make no comment on who will win that general election, but of whichever government is successful, the ask is around devolving more money out to London in particular, as part of sort of that levelling up piece, because actually we've shown, regardless of what colour the borough is, we look at it strategically, and we're able to invest it wisely back into London in an effective way. But that does mean government ceding a lot of control that they currently hold.
But there's no way to negotiate now. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from any other committee members? Yeah, on the budget. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Clearly, I can see the focus of fees and charges is on the corporate plan with increases where you're trying to have an effect on behaviour, and no increases elsewhere, which is of some concern. And some increases on people who are already struggling, such as businesses who are going to have to pay more on some issues. What I've asked for before, and I don't know if it hasn't happened because it isn't possible, it should be possible, is could we have a column that shows us how much income is coming in on which fee, so that there is an extra column. You've got space to do it if you make some of the columns less wide, so that we can see how much each one brings in. Because there are some that make me pleased, such as an increase in, well, I don't think there is an increase this year, but maybe there is on fly tipping charges, catching somebody. But do we actually ever catch anybody? Is the £1,000 fee sitting there, hopefully waiting to be just, charged? It would be really helpful to see where we are getting the income from.
I'll take that away, Councillor Bidoff, and look at that and see what we can do on that for you. I won't give you an answer now because I don't know, but yes, we can have a look at that.
I was successful with my earlier question a few years ago of could we see the difference between last year and this year, which is still there, which is great. We just need to see if some of these fees, it's a very complex list. I think some people in a business trying to work out which column they should be looking at or which section they should be looking at, it's very, very difficult for them to do, particularly if they're new. And I think from our perspective, to see where there's income to be gained and where we're not actually achieving anything in having a fee would be very helpful.
Okay, so just the last question. This is sort of tying to the budget, and it also ties into agenda item number 4 from myself. So, what scope of saving through efficiencies or digitalisation are we expecting? Now, the report does break it down to different departments, but do we have an overall figure?
Not to hand, Chair, but you're absolutely right. Digital runs through most everything. So, to give you a example that's always at the top of my head, transforming the customer experience. At the moment, where we have a situation where some of our systems, if you fill a form in online, it goes to an officer who puts it onto a form or a spreadsheet and then passes it on to someone who makes a decision on it or actions it. That's not sustainable. So we need to look at that. We've got a new planning system coming in, a new housing system already and working. So yes, I would almost suggest, if you don't mind, Chair, perhaps now isn't the time because there's a lot of work going on in the digital sphere. I think we need to bottom out a lot of that work before we can start really. At the moment, I think a lot of those figures will be indicative. I think let's see how they work over maybe a year or two, and then come back and try and give you a sense of what that figure actually looks like.
No, that's great. Thank you. So, yeah, and I'm sure in future sort of OC meetings we can bring that to fruitfulness. Okay. Is there any other questions regards to the report? Councillor Mullock.
Sorry, I'm just looking at page 3, which you have 53 pages. There is a £0.6 million unallocated to general balance. Could you just explain that? What's this 0.6 million? Yeah. Sorry, just page 3. I lost it myself now. Unallocated.
So the unallocated general fund reserve is a reserve which is completely there as a last stop resort in any unforeseen circumstances. So it's a bit of a treasurer's pot. Should everything else fail and there's an absolute emergency, that's what you would draw upon. So we do an assessment behind that. We do a risk assessment behind that. In Appendix A, there's basically an outline of the key risks that the council faces, and we take a bit of a formulaic look at that. So we do that assessment every year, just to reassess what that balance should look like. Previously, it was done like 5% of just gross expenditure, but we've got a bit more of a science behind it now. So last year when we did that calculation, it was 13.2 million. We've reassessed that calculation because your expenditure increases year on year. We've reassessed that calculation and that comes out at 13.8 million at the end of this year. So what we're doing is we're putting aside 13.8 million in our reserves as that complete backstop rainy day fund. The 0.6 is basically the top up of it, because it's at 13.2 at the moment. We're topping it up to 13.8.
Councillor Biddle.
Thank you, Chair. Some questions on the climate budget, if I may, which it's very good to see, and I'm sure that's going to develop next year. There'll be some figures or some measurements in there. I'm very concerned about the electricity supply problems, and I don't know who is responsible for assessing demand and negotiating for it, and therefore how implementable it is. I'm obviously looking at it from a ward perspective and knowing that there were problems in a large development, I won't say which, very large development, where there was no supply for a long time. And they were saying, do I build it with 50 of the flats with electricity and 50 of them with candles because of the lack of supply? So is there a role for boroughs in here, or is it purely somebody else? I don't know. I'm also concerned about heat pumps, which I feel are nearly yesterday's technology. And I wonder who's driving any impetus to improve other sources of energy, particularly for residents, because they aren't satisfactory necessarily. A lot of complaints are coming through about how they function. And going back to the original point, there are obviously a lot more developments to come across the borough, which electricity is going to be needed for. And I'm very pleased to see what I'm saying is a dose of realism in the fleet decarbonisation point. I think we do have to be realistic about that. And I agree with not replacing prematurely just to get the good energy source, but to use something to its full extent before you replace it.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm very pleased that we have been able to include a climate budget for the first time. And you're quite right, Councillor Birdolph, it will develop further. I was just talking to Andrew about it today. This is our sort of first go at it, and it is in line with what the GLA is doing around climate budgeting, but I think there's definitely scope for it to develop further. At the moment, it's sort of a bit of a list of things and how much they were spending and what we hope to spend, but we want to be able to develop that into a real budget, like a financial budget, but a budget for carbon that shows what we need, what's available. I mean, we need to get down to zero, but how we're going to do that and where that will be achieved. So thank you very much for your comments on it. In terms of the electricity supply, it is extremely concerning, and I am going to hand over to the leader for that because he's involved in the work that's been going on through the West London Alliance. Just on heat pumps, I mean, I see heat pumps as part of the solution. I don't see them. I think they are still improving, and I don't see them as yesterday's technology. I think they are part of the solution for how we will reduce our reliance on other sources of energy. But we're doing lots of work on scoping and potential development of heat networks within the borough. And I believe we have recently got funding from the government in order to develop our case further for that and scope out whether that's possible. So we're certainly not complacent. And it's one of those things where we have to look at all the potential solutions because there won't be just one. So thank you again for your comments on the fleet as well. But I'll hand over to Shantanu.
Thanks, Kath. It is a particular problem, and it's a West London problem. So I'm just putting on my West London Alliance hat at the moment. We identified the problem very early on, and you may or may not know across London there are different suppliers for electricity. So SSEN, I think it is, are in particular supplying West London only. I think so. It covers, I think it's Barnet all the way down to Hillingdon. and everything in between. So we are very aware of the problem. In terms of your question, is there a role for boroughs? Absolutely. All the boroughs are feeding into this. So we've done some initial work around what we think we will require going forward, and working with the GLA for initial conversations to really put pressure on SSEN and government to put the funding in to fund the investment into the infrastructure to be able to deliver that. That is a longer term piece of work. So there is a little bit of limbo at the moment, insofar as, you know, when I talk to developers, they are worried about the electricity supply. It's not unusual for kilometres worth of wire to be sort of dug up and laid to be able to get electricity from weird and wonderful places. But we are acutely aware that what is West London's problem can very easily become East London and South London's problem very, very quickly. So that's why that prospectus is important, to give us a sense. And then the GLA are leading on a piece of work across London to try and collate that and look at what the investment is required, and make a specific ask of not only the energy suppliers, but also the Treasury as well in terms of investment. So that is a work in progress. If you'd like more information on that, we can come back to a future meeting on that.
Thank you. Could I just add one point? You've raised it partly with this particular issue when it arose in Chiswick. It's fortunately been diverted. The remedy was to dig a new salt resource right from Shepherd's Bush to Brentford along the most productive economic roads that you could imagine. That's going to have an impact on the budget. You know, an incredible, if all the businesses close and they don't pay business rates, they don't pay rent or whatever it happens to be, it becomes economic for a long time. So I hope that's being looked at, because it will have an impact on the budget.
Yeah, so sorry, you're absolutely right. I talked more about supply because I'm more focused on supply, but actually the indirect impact of that is also being taken into consideration, and the economic impact, considering we're probably one of the largest sub-regions in London, and one of the most economically active sub-regions in London as well, in terms of our contribution to the Treasury as well. That all factors into that conversation as well. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Is there any other sort of questions about the report that you heard from the committee? Anything at all? No. Okay. Look. So thank you for that, committee members. We do now sort of move to the next part of this, and this is a discussion with committee members. We can, of course, discuss what we've heard as well. Everyone who wishes to speak do have a chance to do so. If there's anything you would like to add to the report, thank you. Councillor Biddle?
Yes, it's a very general point, really. I thought it was extremely well written this year and much more accessible than I remember it from before, which I don't know if that means, you know, I've been reading it for 6 years and comprehension is finally bedding in, but I do think it was much clearer. So thank you very much for that. What I felt was that there was quite a lot of skipping about from subject to subject. You had adult social care early on, and then it cropped up again, and then it cropped up a bit later, and then it appeared in a chart. Obviously the charts are separate, but I wondered if we could have some subheadings where you look at the particular subject and deal with it there rather than all the way through. And I don't know if that's possible, but in the context of it being much improved anyway.
So if I may offer just my insight to that comment, whilst I understand where you're coming, it's that flow of information. I think with a lot of these issues, I think it's very difficult to talk about them in isolation because they impact across the council. And as part of our aim to think more corporately about issues, you know, small example, adult social care and housing go very well together in talking in those issues. I think probably we can do further work around sort of trying to make that as simply understandable. But my sense is it wouldn't necessarily do justice to what is quite a complex area to just put them into small areas and then try and make inferences from them. So I think that's probably where they appear in various different areas. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think Councillor Biddulph, I think you're suggesting that maybe having, so the way the budget report's structured at the moment, it's kind of trying to tell you the story of how the positions moved during the year, and then trying to give you the position of how it's changed since last year to this, 23, 24 to 24, 25. And so you do see snippets of the picture in different places because it gives you different numbers essentially, depending on which bit you're looking at. So we can look at it, but it's designed in such a way that it gives you the story of the journey. But yeah, leave it. I mean, we can look at kind of how we sort of pack some of that information together next year. And we're looking at report writing as a thing anyway at the moment in terms of how we structure those in a slightly better way, so we can take on board the feedback.
I understand the point about the journey, but I did think there was some joining together that could be done to make it much clearer. One of the areas that I was concerned about is care, as it were, which there is some concerns there which are hidden in narrative. That's, I think, what I'm trying to say as well, is a bit less narrative and sometimes punchy fact would help. Thank you.
Thank you all. Look, so I mean, clearly it's a very difficult budget. I think all hats to Rupert and the team and the officers behind the budget. I think it's a very robust budget, very good budget. Even so, we are going to be spending a little bit into our reserves. So I commend you. So thank you, leader as well, and all cabinet members here as well. It's a very robust, and I think it's probably the best under the circumstance we can certainly do. So yeah, well done, well done. Any other questions from any other committee members? Councillor Sharma.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo what the Chair has said. It is very robust documents and budget, and under the circumstances, and we're doing very well for our residents. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to just sort of summarise the budget itself and any sort of recommendations, and of course I'll take this to the committee members. So we do, of course, note the draft budget. One of the things that is great, absolutely fantastic, is that we welcome the commitment to protect services. This is the most important thing. And of course, and I do appreciate Rupert's sort of report there of how we look in 25-26. But of course, we want to still continue with all the services. That's what we're here for. So we need those services to be done. Of course, one of those recommendations were also looking at different streams of income, how we can actually get more income coming to the council. And of course, the value of what we spend and the work we do. So these are probably the sort of recommendations that I'll put forward. But overall, it's very, very good. Do I have a seconder for these recommendations? Thank you. It is a vote. Is everyone in agreement of that? Or if they want to add something? Thank you. That's great. That's all done. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much to the team and Councillor Roger, leader. We are going to move to the next sort of agenda item, so you're more than welcome to stay or leave. Yeah, sorry. So you all stayed. Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 4, the delivery plan monitoring Q3 2023 to 24. Following on our budget discussions, we now turn to the council delivery plan. For over a year now, the delivery plan has been a regular topic at Scrutiny. There is a good reason for this. The delivery plan is designed to help our transformation efforts, which in turn help address some of our financial pressures we have just been considering. We have the opportunity tonight to scrutinise Council's work across 4 portfolios: the People, Place, Capital and Digital. Over to you, Councillor Rajwat, and of course, you're here anyway. So if you could just introduce the report, that'd be great. You do
Thank-
have 5 minutes. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief on this. I've kept Cabinet here just in case there are any specific questions on their areas. Chair, in many respects, you've done the introduction for me. So I talked a lot about the delivery plan in the last item. Just to remind colleagues on scrutiny, there are 4 portfolios. Within them, this is your Q3 report. The report goes into some detail around what was agreed over this quarter and where progress was made in each of the portfolios. And then you've got the appendix to supplement that with any further information. As I said, in answer to a question in the last item, it's really important that we're open and transparent about this. I don't believe in greenwashing anything. Also not redwashing anything, but having a mix and not understanding what is going on with a clear narrative, and very, very happy to answer any questions that may arise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rajwat, for that introduction. There is a few questions there, but I guess I'll start with the first one, and it sort of ties in with the budget that we just sort of spoke about. And this is really just breaking it down to individual portfolios of the efficiencies transformation. How does this effectively be workable for our residents?
So it comes back to that point. So all of these strands of work are clearly identified. Before anything is done, a clear business case has to be produced, and that needs to talk through options, talk through what the potential benefit is, give us a sense of indicative numbers. Obviously, they will come through as they are realised. There are project boards for all of these strands of work which meet regularly. And then what you see is the report that is in front of you, going into great detail in terms of the general overview, where the savings are, where the funding comes from, and where there are issues. Now, some of those may well be in delivery, some of those may well be to that point around how they're actually being received within the communities and how we're flexing them. But it's always important to say that this is a live document, and we fully appreciate that we need to be nimble and flexible in the way we are delivering and be able to change and adapt if something isn't working as well. Because ultimately it is about that experience that the resident or business or voluntary sector has accessing the services that we offer or others offer in partnership.
Thank you. Any other questions from any other committee members on the delivery plan? Okay. Councillor Biddulph.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got just a comment on place to start with, and that is another delay for Hanworth Park, which I really hope can be speeded up, because that's been stuck for a very long time, and there are people across the borough who would like to see movement there. In digital, I wonder, I'm coming back again to the need to do and nice to do and the effectiveness of something being done. 1,000 people trained in digital skills is the aim by the end of the year, and 750 have been trained to date. How many in the borough need training in digital skills? And I'm sure that's impossible to estimate, but this seems like a very tiny figure to me, and I'm worried about the cost of the project in terms of the consequence and who it is that we're reaching. Are we taking these courses to people in their own languages, for example? Who is coming through the door? Is it the profile of the borough? Is it the profile of people who've already got some skills and just need a bit of fine tuning? I just think that needs a bit of fine detail provided to it.
So I'll have to get the specific details that you've sort of requested. The 1,000 was a target that we felt was achievable within the term. And the report does talk about locations that's offered from, and that it's offered by volunteer digital champions as well. Obviously supplementing this, there is work by our barn in terms of equipment as well to those that are most vulnerable. But this sort of ties in to another piece of work that we're doing around skills through the Youth Skills and Employment Guarantee. So talking to young people, but also over 55s that haven't necessarily re-entered the workforce post-pandemic as well, and trying to help them out. I think, do you want to add any more flavour to that?
I haven't got any more detail. I think we need to come
Yeah, I think we'll probably need to come back with a little bit more detail to the specifics of your question, Councillor Biddulph.
I'm concerned obviously about cost and relativity and achievement. That's what my issue is about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If we can just elaborate a little bit, I guess a question from me with capital investment, how are we doing with that?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, go on, Andrew.
So I suppose the capital investment, obviously, as set out in the capital programme, two different key components of that, the general fund capital programme and the HRA capital programme. So the activity within there is covered, is across both the capital and the place portfolios. Generally, those projects are capital funded. We've split them because some are about enhancement of place, some are about refurb, not refurb or things that aren't necessarily about the enhancement of the place, but existing assets, or digital or IT or other things like that. So we're progressing with those. There is more work to do in terms of really driving things through at the pace. So once we start something, we deliver it in a timely fashion. We've done a lot of work. We've got far better reporting on this. So actually this time last year, we wouldn't have been able to give you the quality of report around progress that we are giving you today. And hopefully you've seen that improve over recent months, actually, in terms of the recent quarters, the reporting we're bringing through. That's about a change of approach to how we're managing our entire capital project delivery. There's more to do. One of the key focuses for next year is to really make sure that when we've got plans, we deliver against them and we're properly managing that risk. We are doing that, but there's more to go. And it's a massively complex programme.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other question from any other committee member? Yeah, Councillor Biddulph.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the people one now. I'm always concerned when SEND or children in care are in red or amber. So I'd like a bit more information about the concerns there. Support for families, we learned during the pandemic how significant supporting families with special educational needs children is. So I'm worried about that, and the Family Hubs project as well is at amber. And the transport review is at amber, and despite some money being handed back, I think, from that budget originally. So I would like a bit more clarification on that, please.
So Stephen's got the details, and Councillor Chowdhury can supplement that as well.
So just for my aid, Councillor Biddulph, you said three things there, because I was listening, but I wasn't listening on the assumption that I was going to answer. But just clarify what I'm answering now.
Yes, so it's going into red and amber for children, and particularly special educational needs children. Support for families is in red, and just during the pandemic, we all learned how important it is to support families with challenges. And then I think it was only two probably. The SEND transport review is at amber, and I think there was something in the budget earlier about money for transport not being spent in full and being reallocated. So bridging that gap, I don't quite understand what it means.
Okay, so in terms of the SEND programme, I'll pick up where the leader left off, and sometimes it's better to see red and amber than it is green, because for the overall SEND programme, we're working to a 5-year cycle, because that links with the safety valve deal that we've entered into with DFE. So whilst we have rated elements red and amber within that programme, we are actually on track to deliver. We just don't see the financial benefits or the system changes of those coming in until we've planned them. So we're doing work now for changes that will come in probably 18 to 2 years down the line. So that's why that'll be, we're technically on track. We yet have to deliver those bits of outcomes. So that's why you see that there. In terms of the SEND transport, we've done a significant piece of work looking at the demand of that. And again, because what we've determined is that the changes in pupil flow through the safety valve work over the next 5 years will have an impact on which children need to be transported where. So overall, the aim is to reduce the number of children in out-of-borough specialist placements. Therefore, we won't actually be paying for taxis to take children 20 miles to another school and back again 5 days a week and every day of the term. So having looked at that piece of work, looked at the flow, we are absolutely assured that if we do what the safety valve requires us to do in terms of the plans we set out there, again, we implement the cost efficiencies for the transport budget in about 2 and a bit years' time. But we need to do the piece of work to change the flow of pupils over the next 18 months or 2 years to see the impact. So we're assured it'll happen. We just can't say that actually to keep Rupa happy, as I often seek to do, is that it isn't cash in the hand yet, because it's 2 years down the line. And for supporting families, which is the new title for what was the Troubled Families Programme, the reason we've rated that red is because the government department determined that all local authorities had to be up to what was considered to be digital maturity level 4. And that requires us all to move to having, technically in the government's view, a single IT system that manages all of the support and family activity. Now, there's a slight problem with that, is that supporting families is not done just by the council, it's done by schools, charitable organisations, etc. The capacity and capability of having potentially 8 or 9 different organisations operating in one IT system probably isn't a reality. But we've done the piece of work which was about determining the feasibility of how to do that. We've landed on using a module that we can add to our existing children's information system. So we're in the process now of going through a short procurement, because it's on a framework contract available across England, to bring that IT system into place and to have that available by April into May. It won't be fully functional probably until about 10 months down the line, until we've transferred all the service into it. So again, currently, because we're going through the procurement, we've rated that red in terms of progress. So we're still doing the work, we just have not delivered, and we're slightly behind where we'd want to be to feel comfortable about delivering that system into our own hands. So that's why that one's been rated red.
And you're right, there were 3. The other one was the Family Hubs project, which is at Amber, but I suspect your earlier answer applies to that as well.
Work being done now to deliver. So we've put in a whole range of new services on the pot of money we've had from the DFE, which is about 3 million over 2.5 years. But we won't see the benefits of that until probably end of this calendar year into early next year. And the biggest challenge is then to mainstream that. So we've got to, within the existing resources we've got to mainstream that across the NHS and the local authority, because the additional money that we'd be given to set those things up runs out in 18 months' time. So there's a hesitancy about just how successful we can be across the NHS and social care to manage to mainstream all of that, given the pressures we've got and demands that are still continuing to come to us. So it's a bit of uncertainty at the moment on that one.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Is there any other sort of questions on the delivery plan and any other sort of areas that committee members want to look into? One of those questions, I guess, from me is, I think we did sort of touch upon this last year as well. Is there any sort of with our brown sites? Is there any sort of plan for those? Any regeneration plan, or adding sort of building or solar panels? Or I think there's a few bits and pieces we were looking into last time.
Yes, so I need to get the details on the energy plan. Are you talking in terms of regeneration, or are you talking about sort of development in terms of energy sources, income generation?
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be sort of both. So where we can use our land, which is not being used at all, on sources like energy or indeed some sort of commercial.
I'll hand over to Andrew on the first part, and then I can talk about local plan if you like.
So I think we're obviously investing where appropriate in solar PV on our buildings, and we've got a program of work on that. In terms of specific plans around in effect creating using our own sites to develop, I don't think there's anything in the pipeline at the moment. Whether we've got suitable sites for that, I think is something we would consider, because we haven't got those large sites that would be available, and actually is that the best use of that land? We are looking at all the opportunities we've got to do that. And if there are opportunities, we will bring them forward.
And to layer on top of that, committee will be aware we're going through the local plan review as well, and looking at site allocations on that. Obviously, we've got the pledge around building housing as well, and as well as the local plan review, we've also got the asset review as well, ongoing as well, and that's due to start reporting in sort of March. So it's a bit of a watch this space, but there's a lot of work going on around land and sites within the borough.
Wonderful, thank you. Just another question, I guess, from my side as well. It was pleasing, excuse me, with EV chargers that we're going to be doing on the side roads. How are we doing or progress with that?
Sorry, with EV charging on the
lighting posts, I believe.
right. Yes. So that's one of the strands of our EV charging strategy. There was quite some considerable delay around some of the procurement that we had to do, which was due to the government funding that we received, the OZEV funding, which has meant that that particular strand, well, it has been delayed. I think we are hopefully in position where we can go ahead with that soon as the government, they did issue a press release to say that we've got the funding. They just haven't sent us the letter that allows us to actually get on and do the procurement. But hopefully that will happen very soon. With the other types of chargers, the more rapid chargers, we have been able to move forward with procurement for those, and so they're in a much better position.
Wonderful. That's great news. With that, is there any other question on the delivery plans? Councillor Biddle. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Cameron. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the people portfolio progress. There is a 4.4, and it is mentioned safer communities improvement strategic business plan. So, as you know, the west part of the borough, especially the Feltham area, there is a significant amount of increase in the antisocial behavior and crime. Can you please elaborate it a little bit? Is there any plan for the west Feltham area especially? Thank you.
So the Safe Communities programme is due to report later this year. I think hopefully that'll be June. There are a number of strands within that. Part of that is about the Community Safety Partnership Board arrangements and all the substructure associated with it. Some of it is about the continuation of the area-based approach and bringing together with that a new team that we have been piloting in relation to the funding from what was from the police-funded team that cannot be delivered. So we've now got a local team that will be more active across the place in relation to a variety of activities, from enforcement all the way to the preventative work that the team already do. So I think it's really important that we also note that the community safety strategy is currently being refreshed. The priorities associated with that, whilst quite similar, because the situation's not changed drastically over the course of the last 3 years. Again, that will be looking at the particular issues in particular places, as well as the borough-based priorities. So a lot of work underway on that, and that will be coming forward in the next cabinet.
Thank you. Any other question? Councillor Biddulph. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Biddulph.
This is still in people. I think it's the website transforming our community experience point. There may well be, and I haven't seen it, but I couldn't see a cost of this project, and it'd be interesting to have that. In terms of making it effective, one of the things that I think is important to do is to test it with people who don't know anything about it. And I have a particular concern about that, in that a similar thing happened in 2016 when I was just a resident. And I saw something in, I guess, Hounslow Matters or whatever it was, saying we're looking for residents who will help test, and I responded with enthusiasm because I'm very good at being clueless when it comes to looking for things on the web. And I'd be an ideal person. I still am waiting for a reply. So I hope if you are going to be using anybody and you get responses from enthusiastic people, that they aren't just left dangling. That's a bit tongue in cheek, but it's just, the point is you've got to use outside people, you've got to value their responses.
No, absolutely. So there are a number of aspects to the website, and part of that is making sure that we've upgraded the platform so that it can deliver things that are associated with that programme, the Transforming Community Experience. A lot of that is, as was referred to earlier, about digitising process, making sure that residents can access the transactional services online and see it right through to the end. So the website refresh will be enabling that, but it will also be about, to some extent, the look and feel, making sure that we're clear when we want to transact, that's easy to find, and when we want information, that's easy to find. But it's not all just merged together. We will make sure that residents are involved and test with us. You might get 2 goes, councillor, because we'll also be making sure that members have an opportunity to look at that as well. So no, we won't keep you dangling. There will be, over the next few months, opportunities for both residents and members to look at that with us as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mullock, please.
I'd just like to find out from the council what strategy they got on the travellers. I had quite a few emails from a resident of Heston West, where we have Brisbane Street. We had few times traveller has gone in, and they're requesting if they can have bollard to prevent them keep going there. And it's cost. The other second question is how much so far it has cost us legally the fees to evict them from all over the borough.
Can we just talk about the delivery plan? That'd be great, Councillor Mullock.
But if it helps, I'll take that away and come back afterwards.
Any other questions with delivery plan? Councillor.
Sorry to keep bouncing it. Just, this is a very general, something I didn't understand. What is, and I've got this under the heading of savings, so I'm hoping I'm in the right place. What is parking income right sizing? Can't go through a meeting without mentioning parking. But what is parking income right sizing? And just on that point, that may not be jargon, but there's still a little bit of jargon in these documents, and I would so like them to be clear of it. I don't know what BAU is. I don't know SBC. I don't know CAS. So please, can we have some clarity?
So with the parking income right sizing, that's basically each year we do a reassessment of our parking income and expenditure. So you remember the parking revenue account. So we do a reassessment of that. And we obviously, you set the budget at the start of the year, you see the income coming in. And so that is us reflecting on that calculation and looking at our parking income generation as it currently stands and checking back on the budget. So it's reflecting an updated budget that reflects the actual reality of the parking income coming in. And then the PRA calculation falls off the back of that. So you'll have noticed in the last couple of years, we've been putting into the PRA quite a big sum of money through what's been generated in year. So this is just about right sizing the actual general fund budget that's in the accounts.
And
it's basically helping the bottom line by right sizing the income budget. So it's not it's not actually generating a savings, so to speak.
Okay,
it's adding a credit budget in.
Yeah.
I think Andrew's eager to get in on the jargon point, but PRA is parking revenue account. Yeah. I know that one.
Yeah, the jargon. I think of you every time I proofread these, Councillor Biddulph, and it's hopefully getting better.
It is.
So I'm going through, and apologies if I've missed some or I've assumed that some are obvious that they're, but yeah, I will go through it. Believe me, you should see it when I get the raw version.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I'm doing my best to do that, and hopefully it will get better and better.
Thank you very much.
But yes, it is always on my mind.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just have one other comment. I was interested.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. Sorry. External storage. How much? Where? And what for? We seem to be paying for external storage. I mean, I hope we have an off-site crisis centre. That's a different thing, but externals, yeah. Was in the savings. I've written down external storage. What is that? Where is our off-site?
Stephen's looking sheepish, so he might want to come back.
It's a CAS.
So that's me, Councillor Biddle. So as you'll know, we probably moved to electronic records for children's and adult services about 15 years ago, and within the current regulations and law about retention, so for example, we have to keep adoption records for 70 years. Children's and adult services and education services and SEND have accumulated a substantial pile of paper records. So when I arrived here, that hadn't been addressed in terms of actually, could we go back into that? Could we slim that down? Because our retention goes between 7 years to 70 years for various different records. So we were paying for a substantial amount of paper files to be stored off-site and basically managed for us. We've now decided that we can apply much more rigor to our record retention policy. So we've currently engaged an organisation to go through those files with us, to destroy what can be destroyed and to electronically scan what can be electronically scanned and bring it into our IT system. But we were paying for storage every year. So hopefully it's an invest to save. The money we put in will deliver a saving in terms of the annual storage fee.
Thank you for that. Any other sort of question on delivery plan, or shall we move on to discussion of the delivery plan, committee members? Yeah, okay. So we move on to the discussion of the report. I mean, a lot of it we've already sort of spoken about anyway. Just being mindful that everyone who wishes to speak about the report have a chance to do so. But please just be mindful of your fellow scrutineers and do not dominate the discussion. So who would like to kick off about the delivery plan? Okay, look, so it's really sort of tying into the budget as well. A delivery plan, I think, looking at the services side of things. Again, really great work that we're doing to really push through some of that agenda on the delivery plan, and we're not sort of cutting back. Even so, we do have those sort of financial woes. So, yeah, very good plan moving forward. And again, well done. How many times we're going to? I think that's what I'm going to be saying is well done to the officers and leader and sort of cabinet members as well. So thank you all very much. But very good, very robust again. That's how we like to see it. Councillor Sharma, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, what I like to see in this delivery plan is the fact that we don't have all green, and that is just showing how being open and transparent that we are as a council as well, so that we're being honest and transparent to our residents. So that's really good to see.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sharma. Any other committee members want to talk about the delivery plan? No? Okay. I'm going to move on to just some sort of recommendations, again, regards to the delivery plan. Firstly, I just wanted to touch base on the actual reporting side. I do appreciate, Councillor Biddulph, you've got some concerns, and I'm sure those will be addressed, but it's very welcome, the detail of the reports. So thank you for that. I think that, the traffic light system is very good. And sort of gives us a sense of where things are going in the right direction. So thank you for that. The only other sort of recommendation would be sort of digital opportunities. I mean, there's a lot we've spoken today about budgets and a lot about the delivery plan, and really sort of for all departments to really grasp that digital opportunity and consider where it can work, not just for the council, but also for working with our partners. Especially in the sort of adult industry or children's or even housing as well. So huge opportunities there. Do please consider that, and not just the efficiency side of things. It will make it a little bit more streamlined in budget side of things as well. So again, those are the recommendations that I propose. Anybody want to second that for me? Thank you. And just really, just a vote on this. Somebody else wants to add into that. Yeah, just voting. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That's moved on as well. So thank you all for that. Okay, so it's really just moving on to item number 5. But thank you all for being here, councillors, as well as finance officers as well. Thank you all. Okay, brilliant. So, yes, nobody left, everyone's gone, but here we go. Agenda item number 5. So this is quite important as well. So Ofsted inspection outcomes. We were going to be joined with Councillor Lily Barthol. Unfortunately, she's not here. So we do have Steve Forbes, the Executive Director for Children and Adult Services. Welcome. Thank you. So far this evening, we have focused on the money. The next item highlights how some of that money is spent, covering recent inspections of the ride and children's home, the Westbrook Short Breaks Unit, the Council's Children's Services. The committee takes a council collective responsibility as a corporate parent seriously. And this is a good opportunity to understand the services we provide to some of our borough's children's most in need of our care and support. Members of the committee will note that we have received reports on each of these inspections in addition to the publicly available Ofsted findings. Rather than see Steve present each report separately, I'm going to suggest that we take all 3 as a single discussion. Steve, you do have 5 minutes. If you could just produce your item, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair, and it's good to be at the table officially this time, and there is a seat. So as you say, Chair, I will address them all together. You'll see in here we've got an inspection that goes right back to last January. A decision was, when we had the Ofsted inspection in October, that we would just bring these all together because they are all about what we do for our looked after children and those that we have care and support responsibilities for. So it's, for me, not one to be proudful at any time, but it is actually very good to sit here in front of you and be transparent about the external regulator's view on the services we provide. So starting in turn, I'm really pleased to say that the Rye Children's Home in this inspection, which is our own 6-bedded unit, achieved a good rating. It had, as you'll see from the report, some challenges at the end of the pandemic in 2021. But the manager there and the staff group have worked very hard with ourselves in senior management to put an improvement plan in place, and that is evident in terms of where Ofsted say we're at. There is one requirement which we will have to do. So Ofsted will give recommendations which are just that, recommendations are voluntary, and there are requirements. So there's one requirement, and that is based on undertaking what's called a 6-monthly review of the quality of care. And in essence, basically, we've been a bit reliant, as the ride is our provision, for our social workers within the childcare teams doing that for the children, not the home doing it. So the requirement from Ofsted is that the home does that. We have no problem with that. That is the right thing to do. So they have now implemented that, and that is in place. And the other recommendations are all relevant, and the manager will implement those and is implementing them at the present time. Moving on to Westbrook, I am really pleased and incredibly proud of that service and having achieved an outstanding rating. And just to give some intention, outstanding is generally applied to about 2% of all regulated children's social care provision, private, voluntary, local authorities. So it is a major achievement for the staff group there to have retained that outstanding grade and continued it. And again, one, to always identify where the credit is due. I have to, at this point, credit Rachel Ann, who is the manager there, for that establishment having the status she is. If you've ever met Rachel Ann, you will understand why it is an outstanding. If there is a colleague that exemplifies passion for what she does, it is Rachel Ann, and I want her to be credited with her staff team for the real success. You will note the recommendation there is about refurbishment of the building. Regrettably, we have what I call an outstanding service in an okay building. And we have actually undertaken through Capital Strategy Board first stage feasibility about a complete reprovision of Westbrook, because fundamentally we have to. We find children now that use the short break service having much more complex health needs than they ever used to. And that basically translates into children with rather large electric wheelchairs, flatbed wheelchairs, who require 2-to-1 staff hoisting. The building that is Westbrook is just not fit for purpose. So we occasionally have children coming who can't actually get their electric wheelchairs into the building because they're physically just too big for the front door. We also have children with very challenging behaviour where the design, there is no barrier between the immediate interior of the building and the exterior. So there is no safety point in terms of just containing them should it gets a bit difficult. So we've done the feasibility, and we will pursue that through the Capital Strategy Board over the next 12 months and hopefully aim in 2 or 3 years' time to have a new provision called Westbrook, where Rachel Ann and her team will continue to provide an outstanding service. And last but not least was the long-awaited full inspection of Ofsted of our own children's services. We were last inspected in 2018. The usual routine for local authorities inspected at good or above is a 3-year cycle. Because of the pandemic and various other things, Ofsted fell behind. So we were nearly 2 years overdue for inspection. They arrived with the usual week's notice in terms of last October. And what is good is that we retained our good rating. Within the judgment ratings, because it's sub-ratings within, we moved from good for leadership to outstanding. And that's leadership across the whole council and the whole service. It's not just, dare I say, for the leader, Councillor Bath and I and Niall. It relates to practice leaders within the organisation, team leaders, service managers. They look at all levels of leadership. And they saw outstanding leadership there, which was totally child-focused, which is a real strength. We moved from help and protection although we were rated good last time in 2018, the sub-rating for help and protection, which is child protection, requires improvement. We moved to good this time, and in the words of the inspectorate team, we were a strong good. And that's in essence in the text in the first paragraph that says that outcomes for children are consistently good. Ofsted don't use the word consistent without meaning. And there was a new rated area, which was care leavers that had never been rated before, and we achieved a good outcome for that. And what you've got in the covering report is the actions from the last inspection and how we'd address those in advance of this inspection and the commentary from Ofsted about those recommendations. The recommendations we have in this Ofsted report are fairly minor. They are not of a major significance, which suggests, again, that emphasis on a potential good, strong good. So at that point, I will stop. You've got the full inspection reports there. Any questions, Chair?
Thank you. Put it to the committee. Any questions about that? Okay, we've got a few. Councillor first. Yeah.
Let's pick up on what you said about everything. Sorry. Yeah, about everything being good, but then I'm trying to put that into what you were saying about the Westbrook short breaks, about the shortfalls in there. How is that affecting the children themselves? This is what I'm not really getting. It seems to be contradicting.
So the role of Ofsted as regulator is guided by their inspection framework and legislation. So elements of how we operate services are not covered by inspection. So budgets, allocations, buildings, unless they directly impinge on what Ofsted needs to regulate, aren't included in inspection reports. So and the example I gave of the child who we have had there and is a recurring user of that service cannot get his wheelchair in the door, the staff then compensate and enable him to move about the building in other means. So we have other ways of enabling to walk about, to move about the building. So as far as Ofsted are concerned, that child's experience is good because the staff go out of their way to compensate for the restrictions the building is placing on his ability to have his big electric wheelchair in the building. So it's not ideal, but in terms of the regulatory requirements, it is still good. And that's why we want to improve the building, because I would like him fundamentally to be able to use his big electric wheelchair in the building. But it doesn't change what happens at home, because he can't actually get his electric wheelchair in his own house either. So his experience is good, because the staff go out of their way to compensate for the shortfallings of the building as it stands.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor, please.
Thanks, Chair. So Stephen, yeah, thanks for running through the reports. So just on the particular one on was it the Ride Children's Home? Is there anything different being done on the remaining schools where you ran through the offset reports and pretty much to outstanding, or they jump from good to outstanding? Is there anything different they could do where the other schools are doing and they're not, that you think there could be a significant room for improvement apart from the 5 recommendations?
The challenge for the Ride as a children's home is in essence the children that we always have to accommodate. So over my career, the nature of children we've accommodated in residential care has drastically changed. My first social care job was in a residential children's home, and I was caring for children in the range of 6 years old to generally about 12 who were neglected by their parents. Predominantly, the Ride now has mid to late adolescents, 14 to 17-year-olds, who bring a whole range of different experiences, a lot of them being criminally exploited, at risk of sexual exploitation, who are out with parental control, who have unregulated behaviours. So it's a challenging environment for our staff. And one of the things that they have to do time and time again, every child brings a new dynamic. So you're not just dealing with 6 static children, you're dealing with a child that may leave, then a new child will come in, it changes. So we've had that in the last 4 or 5 months, a new child comes in, and it completely changes the dynamic with the other 5 children and the staff. So staff have got to learn to be more adaptable probably than some of them were 10 years ago, because the nature of that population has changed quite radically. And the staff, to their credit, are showing that adaptability. They've asked for specific training in specific behaviours and some conditions they need to understand, how they intervene in terms of non-physical restraint. They are actually asking for the development they need. So they see the need to move forward because the population they serve has radically changed and will continue to change. So we're seeing far more adolescents now who are actively involved in criminal activity, actively involved in violent crime, and the staff are acting as their parents, caring for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's a fundamentally quite challenging role for individuals, but they're doing, I think, a good job at adapting and learning.
Councillor Biddulph, please.
Thank you. Obviously, it's very good to read this report about the Ride, having read the previous one. And well done, congratulations to everybody in making that change. One niggle, and I just wondered if that previous report from Ofsted could have been cross-linked with this one so people could assess it against that. I felt it wasn't quite as transparent as it could be. I'm sure there isn't an answer to this question, particularly in the context of what you've just said. But I'm very concerned about children's reluctance to go to school or to go to education, as it were. What can be done, if anything, to help them overcome that challenge? Can we bring the education to them, or is that not possible? Has it been tried? It hasn't worked. I don't understand, and I should do, what the challenges are. And then to move on to, as we're looking at all of them together, the passion that you mentioned of Rachel Ann, obviously it's just dripping off the page. It's quite clear that that's led to the success at Westbrook. I'm very sorry to hear that you've got a building that isn't fit for purpose, and I hope that the 2 to 3 years can be speeded up. But I wondered if there was anything, I know that these are totally different institutions, which is a horrible word to use, but you know what I mean, places. Is there anything that can be translated or shared from Rachel Ann to the ride that brings, it's not, we had a bit of discussion about this. I don't mean sharing best practice necessarily, but isn't there some of the magic that can be shifted a bit or learned or transferred?
Yep. So on that latter point, we've had a discussion in department about the future of our regulated services, the establishments and the homes, and how to manage them. We've brought in a new service manager role for the regulated establishments, and part of that is actually bringing them together as one management unit. So we're about to transfer Westbrook, which is currently managed within the SEND service, over to children's social care, where the homes are managed. I would hope that brings, just as you say, Councillor, that a little bit more close interaction where colleagues can share their different experiences, because as I say, the staff at the ride do a good job with the nature of children they do. So there's some learning, I think, for Rachel Ann as well, in terms of dealing with children who aren't necessarily sometimes so compliant in their behaviours. So I think there is that bit about that learning. Hopefully that structural change and the way they're managed will help. In terms of the education, I mean, you'll probably see it. It was there before the pandemic. It's been absolutely exemplified by the pandemic across the school-age population. We have a challenge in England and in the UK with what's called persistent non-attendance. On average, across England, 10% of children are persistently absent from school. And there's been a lot of research done by government, by charitable organisations, and that's a dynamic about the purposefulness, the seeming purposefulness of education, the experience children have of education, parental views of education. I think I was quite shocked. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago that a charity did a research that 25% of parents don't believe that their children need to be in school, which is certainly not the experience I had when I was being parented by my mother. So I think there's a wide-scale challenge. It then becomes more exemplified for those children at risk and in crisis. So we certainly see the children and child protection plans and child in need, that persistence absence is quite endemic. And for looked after children, you bring in a whole set of other criteria. So for example, because we have a high number of children who are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children by the very fact of where we are, many of those children have absolutely no experience of structured education. So they come to, say, age 15, 16, frequently end up in residential care or some form of supported accommodation. And the concept of education is not one that is natural to them. So going to school has not been part of their lives for 4 or 5 years. We have an issue with the attraction of gangs and exploitation, and it is really difficult. And I can certainly think of at least 2 children who've been at the ride where the staff, and I think all credit to the staff, and in essence, I advised them that some of what they were doing was putting themselves at risk, challenging people outside the building who were encouraging our children not to go to the school and to go with them in cars and to go and do various bits and pieces. And that's a really hard thing for an adult who's trying to support a child to make the right decision when someone is, in essence, grooming them, encouraging them, showing them affection in a way they maybe haven't had it before, and therefore school becomes a non-event. So the protective environment of school and the benefits of school are missed by those children. However, we do bring in, so we have brought into the ride and other residential placements, tutors. But again, you can, the old classic, you can only take the horse to the trough. You can't actually make it drink. So we've had children who have flatly refused to engage in one-to-one tutoring or any form of tutoring in libraries or with voluntary organisations. We've got a whole, through the SEND system, alternative provision, which goes from things like forest school, where you go to 4 days a week for a term, you will go to the forest to learn. We've got organisations that supply the way of the horse, which is about looking after horses and engaging education around that, to arts and crafts and learning. But again, we have a number of children who will not, cannot, or for lots of other reasons, do not engage in that. But we do not try. And one of the things that I do regularly within the department, meeting head of the virtual college and managers in children's social care and education, is we meet regularly on what I call our top 10 meeting, where children who are not in 25 hours of education or more, we will go through those children and we will challenge ourselves as to exactly what can we do to shift that paradigm. And even if they're spending 1 hour doing something, it's better than nothing. But sometimes it's really, really challenging. Sometimes we are professionally stumped. And sometimes you just need to, as Phil, who's our head of adolescent services, says, sometimes you just have to have a degree of stickability. We're not going away. We're here. We're going to stick by you. We're going to keep talking about education. I will frequently say to some of our young people, have you been to school? Have you been to college? Because that's the stickability. And at the day they're ready, they know that we are here. And we have legal duties to look after children up to 21 for education and to advise on education employment up to 25. And we have always worked as a professional group with support of members. I've always said, if one of our looked after children comes back at age 22 and says, I'm now ready to do university, we're not going to turn them away because the legal duty says they're over 21. Because they've probably been dealing with lots of things that none of us have even begun to experience in our lives. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the right thing to do.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Stephen. Councillor Sharma. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I've read the reports. I didn't read the July 21 Ofsted report where it was inadequate. But I'm imagining that may have had something to do with lockdown and things like that. It's really good that it's good. It's really good that it's good. What I found really refreshing and really, really good was that you've got the staff members that have lived there, that have worked there like 15 plus. And so it's obviously the continuity of the care that's being given there and the stability. And the fact that you've just mentioned as well is that they're wanting to progress in their careers and learn about things, because the complexities of these young children have got worse over time. And, it's just really good. So well done to the team.
You're right, Councillor Sharma. I think in hindsight, we probably made an assumption that staff are more resilient than we believe they can be. It was a hard and tough time for them, that lockdown period. We had 4 particularly challenging young women in residence there. Myself and Martin Forshaw, as the Director of Children's Services, made a decision on 2 of those that we would not move them, that the easy and simple solution would have actually to be to move them out of the ride and find another placement for them. We felt professionally that was the wrong decision to make for them. That resulted in continued and increasing tensions within the establishment, landed us in an inspection. I think at that point, in hindsight, I did question whether or not I was actually going to challenge the inspection report. I was persuaded by colleagues otherwise. When they came back to do the follow-on one, without hesitation, I challenged the inspection report and it came back good. And I will say to Ofsted, they are entitled to make their judgment as a regulator, but I think they missed the point on why Martin and I made the decision about retaining the 2 young women in the establishment rather than placing them. They did, I think, question me as to why we did not place them at distance. And I said, because again, it was the wrong thing to do for them. And we balanced up what would be right for them with regards to what was right for us as a local authority about how we would be seen in running a children's home within the regulation. And I will stand by that decision to this day, that we did the right thing for those 2 young women.
And the thing is what I've got from this report and the officer report is the fact that it is completely person-centered, it is child-centered, it's around the children, what they need and what we're providing. So it's really good. I'm very pleased with it.
Thank you. Is there any other sort of questions regarding Councillor Foot, please? Yeah.
Can I say that one of my earliest recollections of Children's Home was when I was first elected in 1966. onto Hounslow Council. I think some people here probably weren't born then. But one of the first jobs that I got was to go to the children's home in Hamworth. There was a children's home in Hamworth then. And I remember quite clearly, it's so clear in my mind that, it's a long time ago, but that it's an incident that's so clear in my mind and has always been something that's affected me about children in care. But a young lad, must have been 4 or 5 years old. As I walked around, he came over and he held my hand and followed me all the way around. And it was quite moving. And I really didn't know, find a time when I could leave. But obviously I had to leave. But that was a child that really needed some help. And I don't know, I mean, you're talking about children that are in a different sort of problem area than that little lad was. I don't know what his family affairs were. That wasn't discussed, but it's something that's stuck in my mind ever since. And it's clear and clarified and has really formed my opinions on what one of the most important things that the council has to do is to look after unhelped children in this manner. I think it's such a vital thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. So that's pretty good. Any other sort of discussions about the matter? Okay, I'll sort of summary it up then. So we'd sort of just a bit of sort of recommendation here. So firstly, just applauding the efforts of the officers to deliver a good thing for the children who rely on us. So, again, thank you. This whole night has been on thank yous, so well done for that. Maintaining the Ofsted report to good outstandings, using good comms and just making sure that that's steadily, even if we can improve, that'd be great, even better. But just maintaining that and just resilience of staff. So I do appreciate that there's always challenging children out there, but just making sure that they've got the proper well-being and resilience that they require to continue with those efforts. I mean, those are all the recommendations, but is there, do I have a seconder on that? Thank you. And just a vote for all of those. Yeah. Thank you very much. And that is, we come to the end of that. Thank you so much, Steve. Oh, go on, Stephen. He wants to get in there. Yeah,
small indulgence. On behalf of the staff within the department, I would just like to extend my thanks to all of you. For them, their job is a hard job, and the support that we get from elected members and CLT colleagues in this council makes a world of difference. So it's my thanks on behalf of them for your interest in what we do, because we are one of those areas that can frequently be a bit distant, a bit unknown, and a bit scary sometimes. But actually your interest and your challenge and your inquiry and visits to establishments are always welcome. So just to thank all of you and everyone else for the support. It makes a world of difference to enabling people to do their job well. And as you know, Chair, I will be back soon because, as you know, and Councillor Sharma we are one of the first 3 local authorities to be inspected under the new inspection regime for adult services. And our on-site happens next week with feedback to me on the following Monday as to the outcome. So I will be coming back probably in about 70, 80 days to tell you on the outcome of that one. It's a festival inspection in my world. Yeah, it is an absolute delight.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Thank you. Of course, you're more than welcome to stay as we move on to the next item. No, that's it. That's the end of it. Nobody wants to stay, but yeah, we've got a few officers there staying. Thank you for that. Moving on then to agenda item number 6. This is an update from Scrutiny Panels and North West London Joint Health Overview Scrutiny Committee. OSC will know we have 3 scrutiny panels working across the municipal year. As they approach their final meetings of the municipal year, I'd like to each chair panel to provide a short update of their work. Of course, Councillor Siddle wasn't able to be here tonight, but we will catch up with her on our next meetings with a bit more for detail of children's and young people scrutiny panel. If I can ask Councillor Sharma to produce her report on the North West London Joint Health Overview Scrutiny Committee, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was an enormous privilege to be able to host the last Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting here at Hounslow House on December the 5th last year. During the meeting, we looked at the North West London Workforce Programme, where I raised a concern of a critical shortage of nurses and midwives. I was pleased to hear that there is a plan in place to bring these vacancy rates below 5%, with NHS employers developing good relationships with the Immigration Department and voluntary groups as well to help those in roles which are hard to recruit with. Our discussions also covered the winter resilience and challenges faced by the ambulance service, including a delayed response time for Category 2 calls. Some ambulance service improvements, like increased number and better handovers, are already being made. It was noted that Hounslow has been particularly resilient thanks to the training at Brentford's Paramedic Centre and the success of virtual wards at Westmid. Lastly, we received an update on the new orthopaedic centre at Central Middlesex, which is now operational. Responding to our committee's feedback, the NHS has implemented a ring-fence transport facility using ambulances to provide free travel for those facing complex or costly journeys to the centre. Overall, the meeting showcased that the NHS is taking a comprehensive approach to address healthcare challenges and the ongoing initiatives in North West London. Looking ahead, our final meeting is scheduled for the 14th of March and will focus on specific issues like primary care access, dental services and obesity. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the update. And Councillor Mayor, an update from you, please, on the work of Housing Environment Scrutiny Panel as well, please. Thank you.
Sure, Chair. So since the last overview and scrutiny update, so the Housing and Environment Scrutiny Panel met twice, once in November and once again in January this year. So in our November meeting, we welcomed our co-optees, Joe Gilbert from Wild Chiswick, to our panel. The meeting addressed the challenges of implementing new legislations on biodiversity net gain for development, whilst also exploring opportunities to increase biodiversity and flood resilience in the borough. We looked closely at the Nature Recovery Action Plan, which will be officially launched by the council later this month. Since then, we've held data sessions with Giggle, a mapping service from the GLA. This enabled us to scrutinize more closely, pinpointing areas where biodiversity is stronger or weaker and spots where residents essentially lack access to green space. Our deep dive has also taken us on guided nature walk in Brentford, where we explored 3 different parks for varying skills, of various skills, in fact, Boston Park, Boston Manor Park, in fact, Robin Grove and Watermans, where Councillor Sharma also joined us that morning. These are all areas where improving biodiversity has been a pillar of their regeneration, essentially. At our recent January meeting, the panel engaged with guests attending from Sutton, Haven Council, and locally with Ealing Wildlife Group and Haston Action Group. And our discussion essentially evolved around building partnerships to enhance biodiversity and flood resilience. This was, in fact, a fruitful conversation spanning issues of funding, relationship building, and policy in general. And our final meeting will be held on the 11th of March, where primarily we'll be consolidating the findings and formulating a set of practical recommendations.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mayor. Should the committee members want to understand more, I'm sure Councillor Sharma, as well as Councillor Mayor, Councillor Sidhu, will be more than happy to provide further details outside of this meeting. We will see fuller updates when we next meet, of course. So moving on to agenda item number 7, this is the work programme. We developed a work programme in June. It is good practice to keep the document under review. Are there any areas the committee think are now worthy of inclusion or weren't captured when we agreed the work programme? We must remember, though, that our time as a committee is finite. So if we add new items, we need to consider what might have to remove. Any Anything there from the committee? No. Okay. I propose one thing that I want to sort of bring to the committee here. So this is an opportunity to bring measles rates and immunisation to future meetings. Measles rates and immunisations within Hounslow. So of course this is going to be around about the April 24 sort of program, and this is just be good to look into. Okay, yeah, okay, we've got some Councillor Sharma. Yeah.
Rather than just sort of like honing down on measles, can we do all immunisations rates?
Yeah, I'm sure we can get that information. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Biddle.
Does it fit into the second subject on the agenda for that meeting? In any case, can it be slotted into health inequalities and leisure? I don't know quite what that subject is for. You know, it's a health emphasis.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is just me putting it to you if you want to for that to happen. But yes, I'm sure we can work around the work program for April and try and fit that in. But is this something that the committee want to see? Councillor Foot?
Is there an area of concern in these particular?
I mean, there's no concern. I mean, it's just I think it's good just because it has been sort of in the press recently, up and down sort of the country for us to just have a look at the rates and immunisation within Hounslow Borough. So, yeah, I mean that's why I propose it to you.
Is there anything that we can do, if you see what I mean? Is it to note, or is it something that you want us to act on? Is it something that we can act on?
Well, this is it. So we can bring it to the meeting, and certainly if there's something that the council can certainly do, maybe increasing the rates or dropping the measles rates. What can we do to support our residents? So this is us just supporting our residents.
And my point is that it's an NHS issue rather than a council issue, I would have thought.
I'm sure we'll be working with partners with this as well. Any sort of clarification from?
I'm really concerned because we keep on having an agenda that grows and we don't necessarily drop anything from it. It's always an addition. So I'm just wondering about the amount of work. We've got two serious issues on the 15th of April. I haven't had any discussion. I don't know what's happening with the first item, in which I'm extremely interested. Community safety and homophobic attack, for example. I just don't think we should be watering down serious issues with something that ultimately we can't help with.
Sort of watering down here. So, officers, do you have any sense on that?
So there is a mixed, Councillor Biddle's right, predominantly immunisation is an NHS function. There is a joint responsibility across public health in terms of raising immunisation rates. Conscious of a conversation with Kelly separately last week, it might be, Chair, again, picking up, it's up to yourselves. I'm sure Kelly probably already has a briefing on immunisation rates and the work that's been done by the likes of that health outreach team. So it may be, if you're happy, we can speak to Kelly about sending you that briefing and you can take it from there if you think there's something you want to do with it. I know she's definitely got something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, that'd be fine. We won't put it on the work program. Thank you for that. Okay. And then moving on to agenda item number 8, any urgent business? No. Agenda item number 9, the date of next meeting is going to be the 15th of April 2023. And with that, this meeting of the council 2024, my apologies, yeah, I missed a year out there. So date of the next meeting is 15th April 2024. And with that, this meeting of the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee draws to a close. Thank you all for your contributions tonight. We will meet in April. There we are. Thank you all.